Welcome to landdhome. In today's video, we are going to be doing some DIY artwork. We are really changing up the vibe in our home, and we're trying to get rid of some of our signs that have words on them, simply because, well, every sign has words on it. But we wanted to replace it with some kind of high-end artwork, but we can't afford to purchase it, so we're going to be DIYing it instead. For this first project, I found this inspiration. I was just scrolling through on my phone one day. I will pop a picture up somewhere here. And I thought this was super cool. I really liked the neutral vibes of it, and I kind of liked that it was like abstract. It was something different than I usually go for. So this is what I set out to create. But did it go well? I will tell you. It did not go according to plan, but I absolutely love the way that it turned out. So let's go ahead and roll the footage. I got this 3-pack of 18 by 24 inch canvases from Walmart in store. If I can find them online, I will link them down below. I thought it was a really good deal because there's 3 of them. And we are going to be using the other 2 in today's video as well. I then picked 4 neutral colors. You can do any colors you like, but I like a neutral vibe. So this is what I decided to go with. I put a little bit of each color in a plastic cup, and then I know I needed to add some water because I wanted this to have kind of a watercolor vibe like my inspiration. I will talk about the amount of paint that you need a little bit later, so stay tuned for that because I do have some tips. But I started off with just a little bit of water, swirled it around, and I ended up mixing it with just like a butter knife just to make sure everything was nice and incorporated. I then started with my lightest color, which was my steel gray. This is just kind of a chip kind of brush from Dollar Tree. I thought it was just the right size to get the size of the brush strokes that I needed from my inspiration. So I started just making spots all over my canvas. And I wasn't mad at it yet at this point, but you're gonna see later that I'm not quite sure how I was liking it, but I kept going with all of my gray. And then I took my tan color and used the same brush, a different one, but same kind, and started making my lines. This is kind of where I started hating this. I just wasn't sure, and I was not trusting the process. So I went ahead in with my antique wax, that's that deeper brown, and I used a smaller brush just to get varying different kind of shapes and sizes. I was just not about it. So I went into my craft closet and I grabbed this paintbrush from Dollar Tree and I decided to smear it a little bit. I just went in one fluid motion and started smearing. And I liked it a lot better at this point. I thought it just kind of looked like a 2-year-old had done it. And I wasn't sure about just those stark like spots. It kind of looked like polka dots. So I decided to add some more gray, smear again, and then I started getting really bold. I don't paint. I am not a painter. So I was really nervous when starting this project, but I started to just go for it. Get bold. I added more of the antique wax, and the more I smeared it, the more I started to like it. So I just kept going with that vibe. I realized that I didn't really want that print at all, that I wanted something that was abstract. It didn't have words on it, but was more kind of like a watercolor painting. So I added a ton of gray, and this is the point where I would suggest if you're going to have a base color, if you're going to skip the inspo and go for something like this, you want to mix up a lot of that base color. So my gray was turning out to be my base color, so I had to mix up extra. So just start out mixing up a lot. I did want to hit the sides in the direction that I was going just because it looked a little bit weird. Then I got bold. I knew I wanted some black. I had mixed up some black. The minute I put that first black line down, I was instantly terrified. So I went right in with my wall paintbrush and tried to smear it out. And this is where I thought, oh my goodness, I have completely messed this up. But no worries, I did not mess it up. I just kept adding black lines. I only did about 4 to 6 because I didn't want the black to be too overpowering. And I noticed with the black, because it's a darker color, I had to go back and forth quite a lot, not just one fluid motion. To tame down that black just a little bit, I added more of my gray, and this is when I had to mix up more. I also wanted to fill in some of those white spots that I was seeing. Once I was happy with the result, going back and forth, just adding gray as I thought I needed to, blending things out and making that a little more like smeared. I knew that I was almost done. I was really liking the way this was turning out. So I just kept working on it. And then it was a little bit wet. So I decided to clean off my brush because my brush was getting soaked from going back and forth so much. And I decided to do one final pass over it and then let it sit to dry. This was so easy peasy, and it did not turn out like the inspiration, but I am incredibly happy with the results, so let's take a look. This artwork reminds me of something I seen at Marshall's or TJ Maxx for much more expensive. Now, no, it's not perfect, but I'm still in love with it. You could also hang it vertically or horizontally, but we decided to just prop it up on our organ for a little bit of neutral high-end decor. You guys really love that DIY. I actually loved it so much that I did a similar version in our hallway and just kind of made over what was already there. So I will pop a picture or a short video of that right here on the screen. With that one, I did have to use some white paint to paint the backing that actually is supposed to hold the picture in place, but it actually worked out really, really well, and I love how it turned out. Let's jump into our last DIY. And you might be thinking, only 2 DIYs? Well, that's because this last one was a doozy. And it took a very long time, a trip to the store. It was a whole thing, but I think it can actually be really worth it if you stay tuned and listen to those tips and tricks that I have, because it's a really awesome DIY, but there is definitely a learning curve. So let's go ahead and jump right on in and see the fiasco that this DIY turned out to be, but the beauty that it ended up being in our living room. For this DIY, I'm going to be using some artificial ferns that I picked up from Dollar Tree. The inspo will pop up on the left here, and I saw this on Pinterest and I thought this was such a great idea. Now, I think they used real greenery, but I am trying to use this faux greenery. I decided just to do one canvas because I was a little bit nervous, and boy, am I glad that I did. I picked up this flat paint and primer spray paint in black at Walmart, and I started spraying, and I was instantly nervous because those leaves were moving, but I was like, trust the process here. It's going to be fine. I should have read the blog post that I found on Pinterest. I did not. I just saw the inspo and decided to go for it. She probably gave tips, and I did not read them. But I pulled it off, and it kind of looked like birds a little bit. I wasn't sure how I felt about it. Let me stop lying. I didn't like it. So I decided, you know what? I'm going to cover up what I just did. And I got this brilliant idea that maybe I could use the fern as a stencil. So I sprayed it down with some flat white spray paint, and I gently pushed on it. And I pulled it up, and I was like, well, it's not half bad. It's not half bad. It kind of looks like finger painting, but let me keep going with it. I'm going to keep trying. It was worse. The second one was worse. And this is when I almost scrapped the DIY. I was so frustrated, but I thought, well, maybe I should tape it down. So I put some tape on there just so it would stay and it wouldn't pull up while I was spray painting. Now, the tape didn't want to stick too well, but I was bound and determined that this DIY was going to work for me. So again, I just kept trusting the process. I will say you want to spray directly down. You don't want to spray at an angle because then it's going to go all underneath your greenery. So I did that. I sprayed directly down and it turned out okay. We definitely have some fixing to do. It was much better than the first time, but we need to fix it. We need to add in the stems, and I'm going to be using a tiny, tiny little brush for this, and I barely dabbed this brush into my white paint. I didn't want it to be super opaque because the rest of the artwork was not, and I was afraid to mess up. Let's be honest. This DIY took so long, but I swear it turns out in the end I have some more tips for you coming up, so you don't want to miss it. You are going to be able to see all of the parts where the tape was. And I was not expecting that. And again, I almost scrapped it after this. I was like, you can see the tape marks. It looks terrible. But I just dabbed my fingers into the paint and kind of did a blotting, dabbing, rubbing motion, like kind of all together. And it didn't turn out half bad. But when I did the other piece is when I really found the trick. So don't click off yet if you're thinking this is a hot mess, Lene. Why did you do this? I promise I have more tips coming up. I didn't spray the edges because I was trying to spray straight down. So I just took some matte black chalk paint and went over the edges. Now, this didn't match perfectly, but it doesn't look too bad. It's matte spray paint, it's matte chalk paint. It all worked out in the end, but I did want to get all of those edges so it looked finished. This was the original canvas I had messed up that I had to spray all black. And you know what? It actually worked out. Because what I did was I used poster putty from Dollar Tree, the tiniest amount rolled up on my fingers, just on the edge of the leaves. And that worked so much better than the tape. So try the poster putty if you're going to try this DIY. I wish I would have thought of that in the beginning. And it did leave a little mark, you can tell on the tips of those leaves. Not anything close to what the tape did though. And it was really easy to cover. And since the spray paint went much better this time, the tips were a lot darker, so it wasn't so noticeable. I did the same thing again with that small brush, only black paint this time. I drew on the little stems and then covered all of those little spots. This time when I painted the frame, I did decide to prop it up on 4 cups because I noticed when I put bowls underneath before, it was kind of like melding into the canvas. So I wanted to put it on the frame. I also have another trick for you. Take your finger and blend in that edge. Since you're using 2 different paints, taking my finger and running it over that edge really helped it to blend in and not stand out as much. This struggle bus of a DIY ended up turning out amazing. My husband actually likes the 2 tones, which is not what I was going for, but what we ended up with. I am thinking about adding a wood frame around it to make it look more finished, but we absolutely love this. Thank you guys so much for watching today's video. I hope you found it helpful and entertaining. Please make sure that you check out the video and the playlist on the screen and smash that subscribe button so you can become part of our YouTube family. Bye.